I just want to introduce our state representatives who are doing tons of work on the inside and on the outside to make sure that the state legislature passes something soon to protect renters. So there's a couple of bills before the state senate right now that would provide options for renters and for small homeowners and for small commercial tenants who don't have any ways to pay rent right now. So we're going to hear from some of them, and then we're going to hear from some of our allies in the state assembly as well. So I want to introduce Senator Mike Gianaris from Queens, who's going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Senate.
Hi, and thank you everybody for getting on this call and doing this. I hope everyone is healthy and safe. I'm going to talk a little bit about the cancel rent bill, which I put in because Sia and the movement and I are simpaticos. I started drafting this bill as I got a call from Sia asking me what we can do about rent, and so we're working in tandem on it. The bill went in back in March, and it quickly gathered almost 24 sponsors in the Senate, which is a substantial number. And I want to just talk a little bit about where it stands and why we need to do it, and kind of the bigger picture. So we in the Senate, I can't speak for the Assembly. I'll let my colleagues do that. And by the way, Assemblywoman New is carrying the bill in the Assembly. In the Senate side, we are working feverishly to try and come to consensus around some significant rent relief proposals. I'm pushing hard that we do something. We already blew past April and May. So we're pushing very hard to do something before June 1st rolls around. So that would mean going back into session this month to pass something. Ideally, as I think Sia pointed out, the governor would do something by executive order that would be much faster, more immediate, but he has not shown an inclination to do that. He started out saying the eviction moratorium took care of the rent issue, and now has said he's going to look at other options once the eviction moratorium is over, but that is clearly not enough and not fast enough. He seems to be more interested in bringing Bill Gates and Eric Schmidt into New York to tell us how to run our state rather than figuring out how to help people who need the help. And so he's just got a worldview that isn't really the right one at this moment in time as it relates to this stuff. I come at this from the point of view of thinking that, and with living through the experience of a decade ago when we had the Great Recession, where what you saw happen is government stepped in and helped the big boys at the top survive, and everybody else got screwed. And that is a huge mistake. It was a failure a decade ago. We have seen inequality in our country grow perhaps faster than any point in history in the decades since, because what we did is we saved the rich people and let everyone else lose their homes. We cannot repeat that mistake in a crisis that's going to have much vaster economic impact than the Great Recession did. And so we are trying hard, I know those of us on this call and others, to start the relief from the bottom up. Let's start with renters, people who live paycheck to paycheck, people who can't survive if they don't get help right now. Because as it stands right now, just to be clear, as it relates to housing, all of the burden is falling on them. They still owe all their rent. Yes, they can't get evicted for a couple of months, but once that moratorium is up, they're going to owe 4 months' rent all at once. It's ridiculous. It's unrealistic. And what we don't want to see is a wave of evictions come July, or even if they extend the moratorium a couple of months after that, because we're dealing with a crisis that in some respects predated the pandemic. People had trouble paying rent to begin with. And now if they're not able to pay for a couple of months or 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is, because their jobs were taken away from them, how are they supposed to make up 4 months rent all at once or 6 months rent all at once if it gets extended out a little bit? We need to provide real help to them and push the burden of this economic loss up the ladder. So protect the renters first, small homeowners who need rent to survive themselves, or may have also lost their job. Let's help them next, but let's get the burden onto the entities that, whether by manipulation or dumb policy at the federal level, tend to be the ones that get the help, whether it's the big banks or big real estate or big insurance companies. Let's shift the economic loss onto them and let them go fight for it in Washington. Yes, those bills in Washington are incredibly important, and we should all fight hard to get real rent relief down to people from Washington. And I'm working with our members of Congress to make that happen. But at the end of the day, as state policymakers, I am not putting my chips in the basket of Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump deciding to help renters in New York. And so we have to come up with a plan that stands alone from any potential help coming out of Washington. While we continue to fight for that, absolutely, we should all do that. But we also need to create a fallback position within the state. And going forward, recovery is obviously something that's going to take years to come back from. Let's just be very clear. If we don't create a tax on wealthy people to provide services for people that need it coming out of this recovery, we will have failed. We didn't do it this year. I wish we had. The governor's powers in the budget process are very dominant, and so it wasn't done now. But we're going to have many other bites at that apple. And if we don't come out of this doing something on that, it would be a failure that I will not stand for. So let's roll up our sleeves and get it done. I appreciate all of you and the great work that you do because this is really something that's getting driven from the grassroots. We need to keep it up. And hopefully this will be a solution where, much like 2019's entire legislative session was, where the two houses of the legislature get together, do something for working people and people in need, and drag the governor along if he's not willing to join us.